Today's episode of PipeGen Live is all about cold calling. I'll introduce our two guests here in a second. But cold calling is a topic that is near and dear to my heart simply because one of my first jobs, well, my very first job was going door to door selling house painting services back in 2008. So I've always been kind of this like door to door cold outreach type of person. And a lot of the sales training that we do at Outbound Squad, the number one thing that we're helping folks with is cold calling. So we're going to talk about everything from how to open your cold calls. Does cold calling still work? We're going to get super tactical with the frameworks. We got a couple of really great guests that I'm going to introduce you to here in a second. First, I want to thank our sponsors. I mean, I couldn't think of two other companies that would be better to put on here for cold calling. I mean, ZoomInfo, you guys have always been known for having great contact data, but I think the thing right now with Copilot that is just frankly pretty badass is being able to put insights in front of a rep to help them take smarter actions. So check out ZoomInfo if you're looking for ways to make your sales team smarter. And an example of that would be like literally being guided around like what accounts and contacts they should reach out to based on who is most likely to respond. It's pretty cool. So check that out. Orem, I want to thank as well. Uh, Cold call pickup rates. If for anyone making cold calls, let us know in the chat. Does anyone here have a hard time getting people to pick up cold calls? Let us know in the chat. Orem is a great solution for that. Yeah, I see some yeses. They got a
Passionate
great power
methods.
dialer. Yeah, passionate yeses, 1 in 40. I mean, it's brutal out there. They also have some AI in their platform too that helps you prioritize numbers that are actually more likely to pick up, which is pretty cool. So go check out ZoomInfo, check out Orem. Without further ado, let's get to it, you guys. I'm super excited for the guest today. I have Megan Huston, who is a manager of sales development at ZoomInfo. Megan's been with ZoomInfo for 6 years, and that was her first like job. So this is like all you've known how to do, Megan. Is that fair?
Pretty much born and raised. I
Yeah.
mean, I love it. Oh, a lot of things to ZoomInfo, so it's been great.
Yeah, cool. In Abdulla Casino, I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I hope. Last
Spot
I got it right.
on.
Okay. Also manager of sales development. Fun fact that I learned prior to this is Megan actually interviewed you, and you got about 5 or 6 years in the sales development game. So it's good to have you on again, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if those of you guys that are coming on a PipeGen live episode and seeing Outbound Squad for the first time, my name's Jason. I run Outbound Squad. So we do a lot of sales training for BDRs, SDRs, account executives, people that either want to generate more pipeline through outbound or close more deals. So we're going to get to the tactics, you guys. I want to set up the content for a bit. Hey, Donna, good to see you. To set up the content, I want to talk to you guys about a concept called invisible scripts. So an example of a invisible script is when I was in grade school and middle school, one of the things that was kind of programmed into me was this idea, not are you going to go to college, but where are you going to go to college? Like, hey, you have to get a white collar job. And there's these invisible scripts and things that we experience on a day-to-day basis that are subconscious that we don't even really think about. And this applies to sales. And I wanted to ask you guys in the audience a question first. And yes, the call is going to be because some of you are asking. Keep the engagement up in the chat. We're loving it. I want to ask you guys, let us know in the chat, what invisible scripts do you feel like your prospects have about people like us? What do they think of salespeople? So think about the people you're calling on. If we were to ask them, what do you think about salespeople and people that make cold calls? What would come to mind? And Megan, Abdul, I'll kind of open up to you too as well. What are your thoughts on this? What invisible scripts do you feel like the people that you guys and your teams are calling on have about us?
Pushy, insensitive. We don't listen. We didn't do our research. Waste of time. Anything. Bunch of things.
Talk that, swindled, convinced about something
Yeah.
they don't want.
Yeah. I think the reason that I bring this up is that one of the things that we have to acknowledge is what it's like being on the receiving end of cold calling, which is the thing that we're trying to do. Acknowledging and understanding what it's like to be on the receiving end allows us to actually conduct ourselves a little bit better on the call. Yeah, well, lead says no Riz. So there's two objectives with the phone. So before we get into the tactical parts here, what we want to think about high level is our first goal is not necessarily to book the meeting, it's to get the prospect talking. Like we don't book a meeting unless we have a conversation. The second thing is to reduce skepticism. Sales is one of those unfortunate careers and occupations where maybe besides a lawyer or a politician, you start from a place kind of distrust. I don't know about you two. When I hop on a sales call, I'm pretty skeptical of whatever that person's going to say. They sort of have to earn the trust versus when I go to the doctor, the trust is pretty much given there. I'm coming from a place of I trust you and I want your advice. So the idea here as we get in today, you guys, is it's not about having the best elevator pitch. Abdulla and Megan and myself, we're not going to talk about how to have the best pitch in the first 30 seconds of meeting someone. We're going to talk about how do you show a prospect that you know their world. And in our experience, that's the difference between an average rep. Literally, the average is 2% conversion rate of live calls. That means I have to talk to 50 people to book a meeting versus 1 out of every 3, 1 out of every 4, 1 out of every 5 calls. So let's start to break down and get into some of the tactics. And if you guys have questions, there's a Q&A button there at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Try to drop as many of the questions in there as possible to separate it from the chat so we can get to it. And we're just going to dig in. Megan, I wanted to kick the question your way first. Before we talk about like the actual tactical elements of the call, can you share from a mindset standpoint, how are you coaching your reps like around the mindset component of like the mental preparation prior to going into a call? Because I feel like a lot of the situations, there might be call reluctance, there might be people that are fearful of rejection. There might be people that feel like they have to be way more aggressive than they need to be. Like, what are some of the mindset things that you coach around with your reps, like prior to even picking up the phone?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I wanted to go back to that stat of maybe like some people are looking at that stat of, oh, you should be converting 30% of your conversations, and you think like, oh, that's crazy. That's actually something that's pretty normal over here that we're teaching our reps that they should be at least at about a 25 to 30% conversion on their calls. So it is possible. And I feel like when you do have the right mindset behind it, it really helps, right? So what I want them to think of is the fact that we're people calling people. And I want them to think about what they would like to receive or what they would like to hear if they were being the person that was being called, exactly like you said, Jason. Like when I think of there's a fitness studio that keeps on texting me right now because I like won this thing for a free month, and they keep on texting me and being like, hey, do you want to sign up? Do you want to sign up? Do you want to sign up? And every time I get a text from them, it's just like, ugh, right? Because I had responded to them in the past and said,
Yeah.
hey, no, thank you for now. And it's almost like I just get another text message and I'm like, no one's listening to me. No one's paying attention. So I think that paying attention and that empathy part is really huge. If we can go into conversations not necessarily thinking, how can I have the best pitch? But more, how can I ask the best questions and how can I be the best listener? I think if we have that type of mindset, then it calms down people's
Yeah.
nerves quite a bit.
Dude, a better listener, just to be frank with you too, and the 700 some odd people here watching, this is something in my personal life I'm noticing just from, my wife actually called me out on it a couple of days ago. Was like, she's like, I know you talk about listening a lot, but you're kind of not doing a very good job of listening to me. Like, oh, and it made me really think about in sales and especially cold calling, you can get so wrapped up around the script and what you're supposed to say and all this other kind of stuff and just forget that there's actually another human on the other side of that phone line, and you really just need to connect with them. Abdullah, again, we're going to get to the tactics here in a minute, you guys, but I think the mindset piece is important to set up. What does active listening mean to you, like in sales and in cold calling? What does it mean to be a good listener versus a bad listener?
Being curious, that is the main thing, is like understanding and reiterating kind of what was said,
Yeah.
and asking clarification, right? If you're truly unsure about what the prospect has said, ask, right? The worst thing that can happen is they're like, oh, okay, well, at least this person is interested in what I have to say, rather than kind of just bulldozing and getting to what you want to say. So when it comes to that, I think, being curious, and then the next level on the outbound side is be a salesperson there is, where do you fit? Where does what you're trying to help this person with your product, where does it fit into their pain points or where you're active listening? But for the most part, be curious. And if you're unsure, just ask.
Yeah. So I think a really key piece here, Abdullah and Megan, probably to wrap this up, is it's like, are you more curious in getting something from me as a prospect, my time, or are you more curious about learning about me? And there's a really big difference in how the tonality comes up. And we're going to talk about, I see in the chat, is this recorded? Yes, it's going to be recorded, you guys. It's recording right now. We're going to send it out to you. We're going to talk about what to do when prospects like don't talk that much and that sort of stuff. So let's get back to the content and let's get to some tactical things that we can share with the reps. So this stat, again, this is conversion rate into a scheduled meeting. It's a live call. The percentage of people that said hello versus the percentage of people that we scheduled a meeting with. So let's talk about a couple common mistakes. We've already talked about one of them. Mindset. When we attach our self-esteem to the outcome of the call, that's not a great thing. Let's lean in and be more curious. Let's speak about tonality real quick. One of the biggest mistakes that I hear when I'm coaching this, and it's something I, have spent years, because I've been doing this for about a decade and a half or so, years unprogramming, is this unnatural tonality. Let us know in the chat. Does anyone here feel like sometimes on a call they transform into a different human? They start saying stuff like, it's Jason with ZoomInfo. And you just get like way happier and cheerier than you normally would be. You feel like, oh, I got to be super formal. Abdullah, how's your day going? It's Jason with Outbound Squad. The purpose of my call, and you get like super formal. And you have this corporate speak and up talk and like customer service voice and all that kind of stuff. This is one of those things that before we talk about what to say in the first like opener, your tonality is probably 80% of it. So Abdullah, from a tonality standpoint, how do you think about the tonality, the pace
Um,
in which you speak? Like, how do you think about that and teach and coach your reps around that?
Absolutely. One thing I lean on is tone matching, right? Especially if the prospect is on a higher energy level, you better match that tone. And if the prospect is on that lower energy level where they don't have time for you, you kind of have to toe that boundary of being too energetic or too like you're matching the prospect's tone a little bit too much. So in those moments, I coach my reps to be like, hey, it's up to you to kind of uplift this prospect and get them excited about something that could better their day. So I lean on the tone matching and understanding that. And if they are low, let's make sure we're bringing them up. And if you sound a little bit too annoying to them, you better tone it down. So reading the prospect a little bit comes natural over time, but initially you got to lean on what you know, right? Lean on your talk tracks, listen to your calls, but ultimately you gotta match the tone so they're not hanging up on you. You're not terrible to talk to. I put it as like present the best version of yourself and how you want others to perceive you.
Yeah. Tone matching. So if you get someone that's talking very slow, not talking too fast, and vice versa, I think one of the just in general, what I hear is people talking too fast. It's like when someone answers the phone, I think we can all agree here that people don't pick up cold calls on purpose. So you caught them because they thought that you were someone else. Could be a client, a doctor that they're waiting to hear back from, their kid's school, could be a coworker, whatever it might be. And we'll talk about openers here in a second, but it's literally the difference between, hey, Megan, it's Jason with Outbound Squad. I know I probably caught you in the middle of something. Do you mind if I take a minute to share the reason for my call? Like that is just like rah, rah, rah. It just, you can't really distinguish between the words. I think one thing that's super important, just like I did there, is to have these pauses. Hey, Megan, it's Jason with Outbound Squad. I know I probably caught you in the middle of something. Do you got a minute for me to share the reason for my call? And you can let me know if you'd like to hang up or not. Like pausing and really making sure to inflect can be really powerful. Megan, any other pointers on tonality?
I teach the exact same thing. I was just leading training, a training session yesterday for our people that are moving from inbound to outbound. And we talked about the exact same thing about that customer servicey voice, or the concept of speaking forward, not up, I think is really important. And it's a good thing to think about. When I first moved to outbound, I had a paired AE and she played one of my calls like out loud on her computer like speaker in her office, and she was just like,
Yeah.
why do you sound like this? This is not what you sound like when you talk to me. And it was scarring, but it was also like, it was like, wow, like that's something I need to think of. So I think a practice that's good for people is go like cold call your significant other, or like go cold call your mom or your brother or something. And if they say that you sound nothing like how you normally are, or you sound robotic, or you sound fake, I think that'll be a really good unfiltered, opinion for that. Um, but yeah, I think the pausing as well is really important. I always tell people when I am gonna call, I don't know if it's the name of ZoomInfo, but everyone, most of the time, if you're not really intentionally pausing, they go, where? Who? So I would say,
Yeah.
hey, Jason, it's Megan. I'm calling from a firm called ZoomInfo. And that might sound incredibly slow, but it gets less of the huh, what, and when you have to repeat yourself, because then when you have to repeat yourself, it almost makes you feel silly. And it almost makes you feel like what you're saying is devalued because they didn't hear you well enough the first time, or it didn't click in their brain. So
Yeah.
try out different tonality and pacing and figure out what you get the best response with. Treat it like a science project. Say it different ways and see how people respond.
Just because some people are asking, Megan, when you said speak forward, not up, do you want to tell people a little bit more about what you mean by that?
So when I think of speaking forward, it's almost like the like say it with your chest type of thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be speaking like I'm shy and I'm insecure about what I'm talking about. I want to project. I want to speak forward. I want to declare my message. But when someone speaks up, it's like the hi, Jason, it's Megan with ZoomInfo. How's
Yeah.
your day going today? Right? So it's almost like I also feel like you lose a little bit of trust when someone speaks like that, because a lot
Yeah.
of the times it's not genuine. People don't normally talk like that unless they're trying to convince you or grab your attention. So speaking with passion and speaking forward, not speaking like you don't have value in what you're going to say, but watching your tonality. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. Mickey actually made a really good point in the chat too. Speaking forward is not ending each sentence like a question, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, I was hoping to see if you had a few minutes. It's like that little stuff. If you work that out of your system, that's 80% of it right there. Because when you do up talk, you sound like a telemarketer.
Yep.
So let's start to get tactically, you guys, into the different components of the call. So we're going to focus first on the first 60 to 90 seconds of the call, because the average cold call only lasts about 80 seconds. So the cold call is won and lost in the intro and the first 15, 30, 45 seconds. So I'd like to break the call up into three parts: an intro, a hook, and a close. Our intro is the first 60 to 90 seconds. It's what happens prior to us like really getting in a conversation where we're engaging back and forth with the prospect. And the goal of the intro is to gain access and just start a conversation with the person. The goal of the hook, and there's probably varying opinions even on this call around what to do with the hook. I'm a fan of asking a question or two just to get some sort of problem acknowledgement or some sort of challenge or something that is tough. And then we use that to close and ask for the meeting. So let's talk about intros. I'll just kind of open this up to both of you guys. What are your guys' thoughts on permission-based openers? So this idea that when we call someone, they didn't ask us to call them, we're sort of going to almost get an opt-in. And I gave an example of that earlier, something, and we're going to teach a bunch of variations of this, but something along the lines of, hey, Abdulla, it's Jason. I know I probably caught you in the middle of something. Do you got a minute for me to share the reason for my call? You can let me know if you want to keep chatting. What are your guys' thoughts on permission-based openers and variations of that? And what do you guys teach your reps?
For me, I'm pretty neutral on it. I have a couple of reps who do ask that initially. For how I practiced being an SDR, I was not a permission based SDR. Mostly, I ask questions to kind of prompt to make sure I'm in the right place. I'm like, hey, just want to make sure I'm in the right place here. Are you still the VP of sales at XYZ company? And from there, we kind of have that conversation of like making them think a little bit that we are trying to work with the company in regards to making us be a client of theirs. Asking the question, hey, are you looking for new business right now? So when it comes to that intro, I would say like it's neutral. You can go either way. It depends on the prospect that you're talking to as well. Because you'll have prospects that's willing to play the game, and then you'll have prospects who are just not willing to play the game. So you kind of have to figure out who's going to be an immediate no or an immediate yes, and take your at bat accordingly.
So can you walk through that first approach? So there's kind of two schools of thought, and I think you can have a lot of success with either, in my experience. I lean pretty heavily on permission-based openers, but I've worked with equally as many reps that do all the things that say that you're not supposed to do in a cold call that have a lot of success too. So can you walk us through that first approach? If we're not going to do the permission-based opener, can you kind of like back into like what's the framework like behind the question that you're asking, so that if someone is not selling a sales engagement solution or two sales leaders or et cetera, like what's the framework? What are you hoping to accomplish with that approach in that first interaction?
So the main idea, I know we do it here a lot at ZoomInfo, is to get the yes train going. So basically just getting the prospect comfortable with saying yes and accepting whatever you have to say. So we're calling people that we already know who they are. So us asking or just want to make sure I'm in the right place is giving them the opt-in to be like, yeah, that is me. Hey, are you all companies are looking for new business. Hey, are you looking for any new business right now, or is that a focus of yours? Yes, that's something. Hey, the reason for my call is given your pitch, whatever you have to say, and then continue the conversation from there. But the main goal there is to get the yeses going. So like, psychologically, that'll just make the prospect already accept what you have to say. No, it may be subliminally, and like for you listening to it as an outsider, maybe like, oh, you're just doing a trick that doesn't do anything. But psychologically, people are more accepting of what you have to say as long as you get that yes train going.
So the idea there on getting maybe 2 or 3 yeses at the beginning, primarily through confirming a couple of things with them. And for those of you that are here watching this, if you call into either main lines where you're not able to get a hold of the person directly, or there are so many different job titles that could be the person that's responsible for the thing that you sell, that's a great way to just confirm that we're speaking to the right person as well. Megan, what would you add to that?
I totally agree on the yes train. I think that's really important. We want to get people in that framework of positivity and not asking those questions that could lead to rejection. So for me, I'm not a permissions-based opener, but it depends on what makes you feel confident too. Because for me, almost when I'm asking, hey, do you have a couple minutes? Or, hey, did I catch you in the middle of something? It almost makes me feel like I'm devaluing myself and the value that I'm going to bring to the conversation, right? It's like if I was going to go make an appointment somewhere, I'm not going to go call the place I'm going to go make an appointment at and say, hey, Jason, my name's Megan. I was calling to make an appointment. Do you have a couple minutes to like help me make an appointment? Like, I'm not asking for permission. I'm here to say what I'm going to say, right? So for me, I feel like you gain the permission by being slow in your intro, because they'll cut you off at any point if they really don't have time. So if I say, hey, Jason, my name's Megan. I'm giving you a call from a firm called ZoomInfo. I wanted to call you because I understand that you're the VP of sales over at XYZ company, and you probably oversee these efforts. Is that correct? Am I in the right place? Right? And they would have cut me off by then if they didn't have time. Or by the end of that first question, they'll say, hey, Megan, now is not a good time. But then I didn't give them an out too soon. by that time I asked them a first question where they could either go, yeah, like that's me, like what can I help you with? And I almost want to get them to that mindset of like, what can I help you with? And I saw someone put it in the chat of like, hey, I just wanted to see if you could help me out. I wanted to get in touch with you specifically because I understand you do XYZ and I know your company provides these type of services. Is that correct? And then they say yes, and they're almost trying to figure out still like what I'm trying. Am I a potential customer? Do I have questions about the company? What's going on? But I've already let their guard down because I haven't put up the front like I need you to listen to me because I'm going to drill things at you so fast and I'm not going to give you an opportunity to hang up on me. So I feel like if you have your delivery slow and concise, people that are really busy, they'll tell you if they have to go or not. But for me, I don't want to give them the opportunity too soon, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. So for the ZoomInfo approach is yes train. Let's confirm 2 or 3 things at the beginning of the call that we can get quick yeses with. Um, the other thing I was thinking, there's opportunities to probably work in research that you've done at the company too. So if you were calling, I don't know, let's use a different example. Let's say I'm calling a security leader and I say, hey, it looks like you head up security at ABC company. Am I in the right place? Yes. Hey, the other thing I noticed is that you guys just opened up a new manufacturing plant. It looks like in Detroit. Did I get that right? Yeah. And the reason I'm calling is because this is kind of getting out of role play mode. A new manufacturing plant and the security within that plant, that's like an area that a CISO might care about, not just the IT part of stuff, but in a manufacturing plant. So I can verify research that I did too. So I'm
Yep.
showing that, hey, I'm getting in touch with the right person, but I'm also doing, my research. So I think as long as you can do it in a way where you're indicating, again, from the beginning, that we speak with people like you, as long as you can do it in a way, I think it's really effective. I want to show you guys one other thing here. I'm going to get you guys this document towards the end of this call. You guys are going to get like a phone mastery guide. So this has got everything from like how to deal with call anxiety and breaking the call down and dealing with gatekeepers and that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of like the frameworks like that we just went through are in here. I wanted to show you guys a couple of variations of PBOs. And let me know, like Megan and Abdullah, feel free to say that you don't like one of these also. But I wanted to give a couple of my favorites. One of the ones that I really like is this idea of front-loading relevance into your opener. So let's say that I sell HR solutions. And one of the use cases, the problems that I help with is companies that are hiring internationally outside of the United States. So I might say, hey, Megan, I was actually calling about all the hiring it looks like you're doing in Canada right now. By the way, it's Jason with Outbound Squad. Do you have a minute? Promise to be brief.
I like that. I think that's really good.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah, with the co-pilot, even like asking them what you should know before the call, it'll pull stuff like that. That will just let you know beforehand, so you do have that to utilize.
and you just pack it right into the beginning. And I think the important part here is that you go very slow if you're listening to my tonality. I'll give you guys one more. This is Armand over at 30 Minutes to President's Club, his opener. We'll share this doc with you guys here. It'll be too distracting if I share it now. I don't want to spoil some of the stuff that we're talking about, okay? The other one that works pretty well too, this is not a permission-based opener, but it's kind of a variation of like you work in social proof. So if you guys sell something that is like local in nature, so let's say that you sell into school districts or government solutions, like a lot of like the county that your customer is in or the state or the region of the United States can be really important. So you can say something like, hey, Abdullah, we actually work with a few other construction firms in Texas. It's Jason over at ABC Company. Have you heard our name tossed around? And regardless of if they say yes or no, I've worked in social proof. So think about it, is social proof or the local, like the location of what you sell in your customer base, is that important to convey to the prospect? This is like a social proof opener that I find works pretty well too. So those are a couple of examples for you. Again, we're going to share this document with you guys in the chat. Let us know in the chat so far, what's been most helpful for you? We've talked only about the just like first 20, 30 seconds of the call. What's been most helpful for you? What's actionable?
I really
Yeah.
like that location part. I really, really like that. It almost makes it almost makes you feel closer to home and that you've had that little extra thing of like we work with logistics companies in the state of Texas. Or even asking people, like I know for us, we say like, hey, do you guys offer commercial solar services like in the state of Texas alone? Or do you guys operate outside of that? And like technically it doesn't really make a difference like where the call is going to go, but it shows that I've looked in enough to understand like where their home base is. My questions might have some context around that. Maybe I'm a person that's like outside of Texas and potentially looking to work with them, but I don't know if they work outside of Texas. It's those type of I think that's a really good point. I use that a lot.
What I love about that too is you don't need to do a lot of heavy research on someone to know that. You literally just need to know like the industry and the location. It's like
Yeah.
information already right in your CRM or on a company LinkedIn page. Um, so let's go to the next part. So we've talked about the opener. The opener is like, okay, cool. I've gotten past like the yes train and I've said a couple things. What I need to do now is like really explain the reason why I'm calling. And if I did the permission-based opener, let's say, and the person said, yeah, I got a minute, what's going on? What comes out of our mouth next is super important. I think the biggest mistake that you can make at this point is to just pitch your solution and say something about your platform or how you're an industry agnostic thing or you're a dashboard. Um, you are a holistic, like none of the marketing like lingo do you want to pop in here? Megan, I'll kick this question your way. So you did your opener, you did your yes train, you got a couple of yeses. When it comes to really explaining the reason for your call, how do you structure that next statement that comes out of your mouth?
I feel like you need to really use basic, simple terms to describe what it is that you do or the value that you're going to add. I feel like pre-COVID, it was more of a time where everyone wanted to sound super sexy about what they did and like how you like we're the industry leader and revolutionizing the way that company like what right? And now it's like you hear that on the phone again, how would I want to be pitched to? And you're like, okay, and like, where's this going, right? But I think if you tie it back to, again, what that person does and what their title is and what they would normally be doing, what is the thing that you want to see if we can potentially help them fix, right? So say for us specifically, we're selling to salespeople. So being able to say, like, I wanted to get in touch with you specifically because we've been helping a lot of sales leaders in the logistics space be able to save time going after the right companies at the right time that are in the best position to buy. I wanted to see if that would even be something that would be relevant for you guys based on where you're at and how you guys are operating. So I'm curious, are you guys aggressively bringing on new business right now? Just to make sure that this conversation is even warranted. So I want to give a little bit of what we do. I want to say, here's what I think we can help you with in very, very simple terms based on what I know about your company, who you are, what you focus on. But then I reel it back a little and I say, I want to make sure that even makes sense. Someone commented Jeremy Miner. I will rave about Jeremy Miner until the day that I die. He does this all the time.
Yeah.
He says, I wanted to see if we can do this, but I'm not even sure we can really help you yet. So like I wanted to ask you, and then you go in a little bit more. It's almost like you give them the carrot and then you kind of take it away. I feel like that right there completely takes away the commission breath of sales.
Yeah.
Like I love the term commission breath, just the what is it? Like desperate, feeling desperate. Like I wanted to give you a call to get time in the calendar to show you this. It's like, here's what we kind of do. Here's what I think we can help you with. But I want to make sure so that way I'm not wasting anyone's time here. That's what I like to teach and what I feel the most comfortable with.
So there's this short statement about we work with people like this. Here's where we're typically helping them, or here's problems that they're typically having that we help with. And then you're getting confirmation. I call it a reverse pitch. Like you,
Mhm.
instead of pitching your solution, you're basically pitching the problems and outcomes that you help get for your customers.
Right.
Abdullah, any difference in your approach on I've done the yes train. Now it's like I have to
Very
for my call. How do you approach that?
Yeah, fairly similar structure. From after the yes train, I kind of have my reps ask if they've heard of us, right? If they're familiar with what we do, so they understand why we're calling right away. And after we get through that section of like, hey, this is kind of what ZoomInfo does. We're a full go-to-market platform. Just out of curiosity, like, how are you going about getting new business right now? Right. So again, just earning the right to pitch. So you're not just blindly saying whatever you have to say. You're not pitching to, pitching contact data to a company who already has all of those. Maybe they need that data cleaned up. Maybe they need something else. So going about it in a curiosity way, I call it the prying questions. You list out a bunch of prying questions to ask a prospect to get them talking. Even the shy ones that don't want to talk, right? They will talk to you about what they do. People love talking about what they do. So getting curious about their process so you can insert your products and services to where it may fit rather than just, throwing something and hope it sticks.
Yes. So I have a slightly different approach that's like menu based almost, and it depends on who you're reaching out to. But basically the idea is that we say, here's what we hear people like you wanting to accomplish, but they run into this problem. How does that compare to your day to day? I'll give you guys like a really practical example. So let's say one of my clients sells a contact center solution. So they want to call like a VP of contact center at Nordstrom, let's say. That'd be a really practical example. So the reverse pitch is, yeah, Megan, again, we speak with a lot of contact center leaders at companies like X, Y, and Z. And the number one thing that we hear is that they actually want fewer people to call into the contact center so that they can reduce cost to serve. But what they have a really hard time figuring out is why people are calling in so that they can prevent it. And I'm just curious, like how, if at all, does that resonate with what you're working on right now and what you're seeing in your day to day? So what you guys can think of is that was a contact center example. There's lots of other examples we can give. If you can pick a common goal or two, where it's like, your target audience, the person that you're calling, they typically want to do this thing, but they run into this problem, and then ask them how it resonates. That can like be a great way to put bumper guards up on the conversation so that you can focus the questions, Abdullah, that you were talking about around the follow-up. So two different kind of approaches there, you guys. You can start high level with like, our company does this, and like, here are the people that we help and how we help them, or the problems that we solve. There's also that like very persona specific approach that I just shared of people like you tend to want to do these things, but they run into these problems. The key idea though, is that you cannot be assumptive. You cannot assume that you know what they're struggling with. I'm just going to share through customer voice what I hear people like them say. And what you're doing at the same time is educating that prospect on what you hear. You're showing and displaying social proof and that you talk to people like them. So after this piece, we have to ask questions. So I call this like part of the call the hook. So Abdullah, you said something around, um, what was it? Probing and not prying? Is that what you said? Or did someone say that in the chat? I think Mickey said probing, not prying. So, so the questions here, how do you think about asking the questions and framing them? Because a lot of times I think you can run into two things. If you go like straight for the jugular, I find that a lot of people are unwilling to open up because you're a complete stranger. So if you just ask them, what's your biggest challenge in getting new business right now? That may not go over well with a prospect that is like known you for 2 minutes. You're asking them to open up about the stuff they don't do well in their job right now, or what might be going wrong. Um, so how do you kind of recommend like framing the questions so that the prospect actually opens up and feels comfortable sharing the
Yeah,
problems?
credibility is a big thing, right? Having them understand why you are calling. So you're not just a stranger to them. So building rapport, letting them know where you're calling from, who you are, and what you are trying to do if you have time to do that beforehand. And then when it comes to framing the questions, that's the science experiment we talked about earlier, right? Some people are going to take it one way, others may take it a different way. So you're trying to phrase the questions where you're directing them to an answer. You know the exact answer they're going to give around the same exact answers that they're going to give so that you're able to pitch around that. Gaining trust I'd say gaining trust and building rapport, if you have the time to do it, I think is the best way to do that. And when it comes to framing the questions, a lot of trial and error of what works for some people, because you can phrase something that seems very pushy to begin with, but as you become senior in your role, you're comfortable saying that. You say it in a certain tone where it's not like you're trying to make them look bad or make them say things that, make them look bad. So the confidence, what you say, the curiosity, and how you say it, that's where that science experiment really comes from, and how you shape it. Because like I have reps who say the same exact words, the same exact how are you going about getting new business right now, but say it in many different ways. Like obviously the newer SDRs say it in a way where you're like, change the tone a little bit on that, because it's more so like, it sounds attacking rather than genuinely curious.
Yeah. Do you have any examples, Megan, of questions that you like to train your reps around, and maybe good versus bad examples might be
Yeah.
key here.
I think a good thing that people don't do enough, but it works really well, is just like repeating what someone says in their prior explanation of the prior question that they gave you, and just say like, what do you mean by that? Or tell me more about that. Because I feel like what we think of is we need to have the list of perfect questions in our mind, where then someone put it in the chat where we're listening, but we're just thinking about that next question. And they could have given us something really, really good to
Yep.
expand off of, but we just go, okay, so how about this? Tell me about this. And it's almost like if someone's asking me questions and they don't ask me to dive deeper, either they just really don't care, or they're not listening, or they just have a motive. So I think that's something that we need to be really good at, is if you like what you said about like, hey, I just wanted to see if you resonate with that at all. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like for you? I feel like you could use that question right now there. Like, tell me more about what that looks like for you. You could use that no matter what you sell, right? And if they go into, well, we do this and this and this and this, okay, why do you do it that way? I'm curious. Or can you tell me more about that? Or can you elaborate on that? I think those are the biggest things that we should be doing, because it shows that we're listening. And a lot of the times we don't need to be creative with all of these sexy questions that we have. We just have a conversation. It's like the same thing if you were catching up with a friend. You're not going to go grab coffee with a friend and have a million questions for them. It's just going to be a back and forth dialogue. So I know it's not a super great pointed answer, but I think it's just the next question that you could get could probably just be from the answer that they just gave you, if you just ask them to
Yes.
elaborate and you go off of the last point that they gave you.
So you make such a great point there, in that you have to step back for a second and just think, I'm conversing with another human being. And a really big part of being an effective conversationalist is just acknowledging and making the other person feel seen in that conversation and that you're listening. So when you just go question after question after question after question, that's not active listening. Active listening is like thinking and responding to like what the person might have said. I'll give you guys an example. I work with a company, large company that sells an e-com platform into small business owners. One of the big value props is they piece together their e-commerce platform with like custom developers and all this other stuff that is like a major headache for their team. And like people will quit on the team because it's like so much work to manage the back end. So I was listening to a cold call, and one of the people was like, yeah, it's just so tough right now because like we literally have people quitting because our systems are so hard to manage. Like this guy said this on a cold call. And then the rep after that was like, "Oh yeah, well I'm glad I called. We can definitely help you with that. Let's get." I'm like, "Dude, you didn't acknowledge the fact that this person shared something kind of vulnerable with you,
Right.
a frustration, and all you had to say was, Megan, that's God, that sounds really frustrating. People on your team are quitting." And just let them talk. You know what I mean? Like there's a like just connect with the human on the other end of the line. This is such a big part of questions is when you do ask a question and someone opens up, just acknowledge like what they're sharing with you. I'll give you guys one other tip and then we'll keep moving. Um, a great way that you can get people to open up about something very specific is to talk about a specific problem that you hear and then ask them how it resonates with them. right? So if I use the contact center example, I might say, yeah, in a lot of oftentimes I was just, speaking with a contact center leader yesterday, what they were doing with their team was they were hoping they could get like the transcripts of calls and the emails and the text messages so that they could extract the information from that around where people are getting stuck. The only thing they ran into was there wasn't really an easy way to get all of that data into one place. I'm curious, how do you guys get like customer conversation data to see if there's anything in there that could help you prevent people from calling in? Oh, no, we don't really have that. Oh, tell me more about that. Like, how do you guys approach preventing people from calling in right now? Like if you have like a very specific problem that you solve, like just sharing that I heard this from someone else, how does that resonate? Can be super effective. So we got about 10 minutes left. Let's transition here. Let me share the screen again. We've talked about the intro so far. We've talked about the hook, getting them to open up about how they're getting the job done. Let's talk about how we can transition into closing. So how to wrap up the call. And the reason why I think it's important to spend some time on this is that a lot of reps that I work with find it kind of awkward to transition. Like they don't really know what to do. And sometimes a prospect just drones like on and on and on and on, and they aren't able to like cut the call a little short. And then I think the second part of this is how do you set up the call in a way where you're going to get a really high show rate to that call? So Megan, I'll kick this question your way. How do you think about transitioning from like the actual, I've gotten some questions answered, I've gotten a problem or two, and the close, what I'm referring to you guys is closing by asking for the meeting because this is a cold call. So how do we close and ask for time? How do you think about the transition?
I think it was going off of what you were talking about saying, okay, so what we do with most people or what most people find valuable is booking about a 20-minute screen share. So that way we can take everything that we've talked about, you can actually visualize it. When we do that, it normally makes the most sense to people. People walk away with a really clear understanding about what we've been talking about and whatever you want to say after that. I think that's the best, is saying like, okay, so what folks normally do and they find value in is by doing this, whether it's booking a consultation, booking a Zoom call, booking a in-person meeting, like whatever the case is. I think that's the easiest way to do it, is just by saying, this is how you're going to find value, not just doing like, I don't like it when people say, so this is what we do over here. We book a Zoom call and we do this and we're going to hop on and we're going to be on for however long. It's like, okay, so that's how you do it. What if I don't want to do it that way? Because we have people all the time being like, well, can we just hop on another phone call? Or can you just send me an email? Right? Stuff like that. Everyone gets that. So if we say, okay, great, like sounds like we have some really exciting stuff, I would love to be able to dive in further. The best way we can do that based on how most people give us feedback is by doing this, this, and this. And I feel like normally that makes people more receptive. And then you get rid of those like, well, can we just do this instead? Or can you just give me a call? Or can you just send me an email? Because you've already described the value of why we should do it this way based on how you've done it in the past with other clients.
Yeah, I love that language around what we normally do, what our clients normally prefer. Like that normally, that word is it's just very comforting to hear. Okay, I'm just doing what we normally do, right? This is what my peers often do in this situation. Abdulla, anything else from you around either transitioning to the close or just like the specific logistics around setting up the meeting and how to go about that piece?
Right. Yeah. One of the main things we look at is your good fit show rate, right? Is like how many people can you get to show up to the call, and how you kind of premise that on the call is I think it's as important as your intro talk track or intro script. I you know I just call it, it's your closing script. Make sure it's the same. Make sure you're setting expectations. So repeat the times that you reiterated. And then from there, the expectations of, hey, if you don't accept this invite within the next couple of hours, I'll give you a ring just to make sure it didn't land anywhere else. And then following up with that is the expectation of like, hey, I'll also give you a call as a reminder the day before the meeting, just to make sure we're all set for that. If you don't answer, definitely no worries. I'll leave a voicemail and shoot over an email just to confirm if anything comes up, let me know. And on your side as the SDR, you have to follow up on those things. I like letting them know what we are going to do, because I know we lose a lot of prospects just by, pinging them a bunch of times after we've already agreed to meet. That leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. So you want to set expectations and let them know what's going to happen up until that point, and then reiterate the value of the meeting, right? What's going to be going on? What's the agenda of the call, and what value you're going to get out of it? Tell them have a great day.
Yeah. I have a good example of this. Like, I just booked a physical therapy appointment. They called me, we scheduled everything, whatever. And then they were like, "Are you okay if we shoot you a text? Like, just like as a reminder, like I don't want to like bombard you with stuff." I was like, "Yeah, like I appreciate it. That would be totally fine." Versus if they hadn't told me, and then maybe I start getting a bunch of texts from them, I'll be like, "Oh my goodness, like this is a lot," right? But I'm not going to ask permission, like, "Hey, can I call you to confirm?" Like, I am going to tell them, like, "Hey, if I don't see an accept from you, you're going to get a call from me in about an hour. If you don't want to call from me in about an hour, just go ahead and accept the invite." And like, you can get a giggle that way. Like, it's like, "Hey, I'm going to do this. If you don't want me to, then just hit accept." Either way, I'm probably going to call you the day of, make sure we're good to go. And by the way, if I don't hear back from you, is it okay if I shoot you a text reminder as well? And then you've gotten their permission. Because I feel like a lot of people are just like, do I not? I don't know. And people have very passionate feelings about follow-up. So just tell them what you're going to do. And then if there's something where you're on the verge of like, do I not? Then just ask them. And that way you can get a yes or a no and you can feel good about it.
So a couple things, and Matt in the chat had pointed this out. One additional thing I think that works really well is getting them to confirm the calendar invite on the call while you have them. And that way you make sure it doesn't go to spam. Both Google and Outlook now have some sort of thing where if a person has not had prior email communication with you, the invite just goes to their email address and doesn't hit their calendar until they accept from the actual email.
Yep.
So just explaining that, you guys, like, "Hey, Abdulla, before we jump, would you mind opening your email real quick and accepting the invite? I want to make sure it doesn't go to spam." And you just literally wait 20, 30 seconds for the prospect to do that. That can be a really big thing. And then you had mentioned there around making sure it was okay to text. Like, this is so money, especially for you account executives. You want to be texting your prospects through deal cycles. So getting that opt-in to text is really great. Another thing as an SDR you can do when you get the opt-in to text is you could say, "Megan, I'm really excited for you to meet with Abdulla. I'm going to go ahead and open up a text chain with you, me, and Abdulla. If any questions come up, feel free to drop it in there. He's going to send a confirmation text to you." You can open up a text chain too. Now Abdulla is like immediately threaded in to the meeting via text. Let's do a couple things real quick because we got 5 minutes. I'm going to share this doc, you guys. Let me drop it into the chat. You're going to have to make a copy of that. There's a bunch of people on here, so hopefully that link goes through and works for you guys. Click on that link and make a copy. There's a whole section. Everything that we've talked about in here is in like written form, along with like voicemail stuff, gatekeeper stuff, etc. So go ahead and check out that link, download it, let us know what you think. We'll send it out via email. So if it's blocked for some reason on your computer, we'll get to it. I wanted to ask you guys some questions that we got in the Q&A because we got a couple more minutes here. What are your guys' thoughts on voicemails?
I love them.
Yeah. So I think we should talk. Do you leave a voicemail or not? And then if you do, what does the voicemail sound like?
For me, I think it's really important to leave a voicemail just stating that you're a human. You give your name. I say, "Hi, Jason. This is Megan. Sorry I missed you. Give me a call back when you have a chance." I know it's contradictory. People think like, oh, you need to say the company name. You need to not. I think they just really need to know that you're a human on the other line when you give them a call. And if you think about the fact that most people nowadays, especially if you're calling people on their cell phones, they're reading the transcript on their iPhone. They're not even like looking at or like listening to the voicemail. So the fact that you took the time to even leave them a voicemail that they can read, that's one sentence, I think is great. Now, if you have that person in your pipeline and you're calling for multiple days, then the second time you call them, maybe it's like every other day. Maybe you call them again, then I would leave them a longer voicemail. "Hey, Jason, it's Megan again. I'm calling from ZoomInfo. I had a question for you. I wanted to see if you can get back to me as soon as you can. Thanks." Very, very short, sweet, to the point. But I think voicemails are huge. I feel like way more people would answer, especially if they're in your pipeline and you're calling for multiple days, if you just let them know who you are.
Yeah. Voicemail statistically, there's a couple things that, Orem did a big study of like 7 million calls through their system, and they found that the pickup rate on the second, third, fourth, fifth time is 25% higher if you leave a voicemail after the first call.
Yep.
I think another thing too is instead of asking for a call back, point them to an email that you sent them and give them the subject line. So ask them to do something that's lower friction. Mohammed asked a question. I'll send this one your way, Abdullah. How long should these calls last ideally? How many questions is too much? So like, how long do the cold calls tend to last when you guys book meetings? I know it can range, but
yeah, it can range. You can see it anywhere from like 4 to 7 minutes, I would say. It truly depends on the prospect. If you're, this is an opinion of mine, if you're the SDR controlling majority of the conversation and the prospect's very receptive, you're probably looking at that 4 to 5 minute mark just to get everything polished down, understand the value, and understand the prospect's needs. But it usually sits around that range. But, don't get me wrong, there's been some really good meetings booked that's been at that 15-minute, 20-minute mark where I'm like, where if a rep sent me that, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta sit back and listen to this like it's an episode, right? So it truly depends, but majority of the time, from what I've seen, it sits in that 4 to 7 minute range.
Yeah, perfect. Megan, Abdullah, you guys, this was action-packed. Thank you so much for coming on the show. For everyone else, love the engagement. I hope today was super valuable. That link, keep that link that I dropped in. I'll drop it again. I know there was like too many people to be able to access it. Save that link. You'll probably be able to access it later. And I'm going to email it out as well so that you guys have it. But again, Megan, Abdullah, thank you so much for coming on. This is like super action-packed, and I hope everyone had a good time and learned a ton. That's all we got for you guys today. We'll give you guys an extra minute back on your calendar. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see ya. Thank you, everyone. See ya.